Hi guys, welcome to astrocala.co.uk. Today I'm just going to do a brief tutorial of Sequence Generator Pro and my equipment profile and user profile setups. This is not a live tutorial, unfortunately. I have rain and clouds for the next couple of weeks, so I thought I'd just use this time to show you guys my equipment profile setup and hopefully sort of teach you a little bit about Sequence Generator Pro. Unfortunately, Sequence Generator Pro is not free. It is $99. Personally, I think $99 you get a lot of software for your money. Previous to that, I was using ABT, which is Astrophotography Tool. Still a great bit of software, but I feel that you're very limited with that. I will do a tutorial on APT because I know that a lot of you guys are still using it. So anyway, back onto Sequence Generator Pro. So this is my sort of control center for Sequence Generator Pro, my dashboard, if you'd like to call that. You sort of can have whatever information you want, but this is the information that I've chose to have displayed on the left hand side and on the right hand side. So on the top left hand corner here you have the sequence, which basically is feedback of the status of where your sequence is. Underneath it you have the PHD2 software integration with that, so I like to have that there so it saves me flicking between multiple pages. I just sort of keep this page up. I could see if my guiding is a success or if I've had any problems. Normally when a fox is run across my garden in the middle of the night, I sort of see them. Histogram here, this is basically just your histogram. Obviously we always like to see the histogram. Have the auto stretch function enabled, which carries out an auto stretch on your raw images, so you can sort of see what they're looking like if you have any problems. Scope centering, this is plate solving. This here is PlateSolve 2 I use. I find that PlateSolve 2 is a great bit of kit. There are a few different plate solving softwares that you can integrate in with Sequence Generator Pro, but PlateSolve 2 works for me. With regards to plate solving, I will do a separate tutorial for that, a live tutorial when the weather clears up. On the right hand side at the top I have my telescope. This is my EQ6R Pro, and this basically gives you your current RA and declination, also gives you time to a meridian flip, and you can park and set park there. Underneath is the temperature sequence for my CMOS camera, which is an ASI 1600. Again, obviously you can adjust the set point and time that this will do this in. Below that is my filter wheel. I have 7-position filter wheel with L, RGB and narrowband, HA, O3 and S2. Below this I have my focus control. So this is a Pegasus focus cube. This is where I can control with the auto focus settings here. I do use autofocus occasionally, depends, normally only for narrowband imaging. As you can see at the bottom I do have some tabs. Unfortunately you can't fit everything you want on the dashboard, so I sort of put all of my focus and image statistics under this. Frame and focus, this is pretty much your live view. I use this for focusing with a batten off mask, and if you want to manually set the position of your target, you use frame and focus. Image statistics, always handy to know your image statistics. I normally use mainly this for the half flux radius when I'm setting up my step sizes for my focuser when I'm setting up autofocus. With regards to the autofocus function on Sequence Generator Pro, I will cover that under a separate tutorial because there's quite a lot of work involved there. Before I go on to this here, I'll sort of just go through my profiles. So this is my user profile. That's me. This is site is my home, and then I have my altitude, longitude, and latitude. I do use EQ Mod ASCOM, so I do use a GPS where I can import that all in from my scope. So if I was to connect my mounts here, and go to my profile manager, as you can see, I can now import that from my scope, which is always handy to have. GPS, I tend to find it gives you the most accurate readings than using mobile phone apps and stuff like that, but yeah, that sort of works for me. So user profile set up quite easy. Equipment profile, as you can see, I have an eSprit 100 ED and a ASI 1600. This is the only rig I'm using at the moment. I do have a Celestron 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain telescope, but sort of haven't used it for a while. So here you have the tabs. Currently the one we're on at the moment is my camera tab. As you can see, this is my camera here. If you hit the settings here, this brings up the ASCOM settings. As you can see, I have my gain set at 200 and my offset at 50. You can adjust the gain settings in Sequence Generator. So if you just stick 200 in there, that will set that to 200 at what binning. I don't bin, I only use 1x1. I don't bin at 2x2, 3x3 or 4x4. I know a lot of guys do bin. I don't really ever see the benefit of it, but at the moment I leave that as link cam, and if I ever want to adjust my gain settings, I do that via the ASCOM software. These are your cooler settings for the camera. So I have mine set at -20 degrees and to achieve in 10 minutes. Don't really want to go any lower than 10 minutes because, obviously the camera will work extremely hard and you will find that it will fail if you sort of go anything less. Mine normally achieves at around 7 minutes, depending on the external conditions outside in terms of ambient. Can do that a lot faster, but I always find that around sort of 6 to 7 minutes I always achieve my temperature. Cool down on camera connect, I always have that selected. So the moment I connect my camera, I'll just quickly show you. As you can see, my camera will automatically start to cool now. Okay, and there you go. So you should see that. There you go. So 5%. As you can see, it's quite warm in my house at the moment. That's obviously because I've got the heating on and I'm not too far away from a radiator. So yeah, that won't achieve that, but never mind. So just going back to the equipment profile manager. I don't normally use warm up. A lot of people tell me I should. You should, at least get your camera sensor up to 0 degrees before it's switched off. Something I've never done. Maybe it's something in the future I will start to look at. But again, if you want to warm up your sensor after a sequence complete, you can just select that and select your warm up, and again the period of time you want to do that. Settings and specs. With regards to angle, I leave that at 0. I believe my sensor chip is currently sitting at 180 degrees. I do that. It doesn't really matter. If your sensor's set at 30 degrees, you should sort of work it out really. And when obviously it images, it will then obviously square your image up. But it's not very important. It works without it. So I just have that at 0 degrees. Scale, you can get this from your manufacturer's technical information. If you don't have that, you can just upload an image to astronomy.net and that will give you all of the information you need. A lot of people do say that uploading your image to astronomy.net is more accurate. I think if I do mine, I get 1.412. However, I've just put the technical data in received from the manufacturer. Again, for your readout noise, you will get this from your technical data sheet from your camera, along with your pixels width and pixels height. So all of this here you will get from your technical data sheet. Download times, I just leave this at default. Use high speed download settings. I don't really, sort of play around with any of that. So I sort of leave that. But if you want to set some download times and stuff, you're more than welcome to. But I sort of try and get mine through as quickly as possible. Filter. This is my filter wheel. I have 7-position filter wheel. Luminance, red, green, blue, HA03 and S2. Again, if you hit the settings, this brings up your ASCOM settings here. Set filters. So as you can see, these are my 7 filters. AF exposure. So this is autofocus exposure. So if you use the autofocus function, you sort of need to work out what exposure lengths you need for the autofocus to work. Now, you can work this out by just playing around with the frame and focus and taking your HFC readings. However, I sort of found these values on a couple of forums for the ASI 1600, and to be honest, I've had no problems with them. They sort of work well for me. A lot of people using this camera are coming up with the same sort of values, so that sort of works for me. Focus with filter, I just leave that to default. Obviously, that will pull from the ASCOM drive. Obviously, these are the same, so I've got my luminance red, so just leave that at default. If you sort of play around with that, you're going to be calling for a luminance filter, but you're going to be focusing with a red. My default for focus is luminance filter, but just leave that to use. But if you use different filters for focusing, you can change that in the autofocus settings and just leave these to defaults. Flats, I will come on to this on another tutorial. Sequence Generator Pro has a flats calibration wizard, which is a cool bit of software for getting your the flats data, getting it right at the correct ADUs and stuff like that. So I will cover that under a separate tutorial. So moving on from this, focus. This is my focus. I have a Pegasus focus cube, as you can see. Again, if you select the settings here, it will bring up your ASCOM settings. Other settings here is override. I don't really use any of this. I don't use backlash or anything like that. I don't have an environmental device for temperature, so I use the environmental device that comes with the focus up. So again, I don't really use any of that. Fine focus and coarse focus steps, I sort of have my defaults at 5 and 10. That sort of works for me. If you sort of want to adjust those slightly, you can do that here on the focus control and adjust the steps manually. But these are my defaults and they work for me. Reverse direction, obviously you need to test your focuser and see if that needs. I have found in the past with some focusers that you need to have the reverse direction enabled to get the focuser to operate quickly. Otherwise you can damage your focuser and your focus motor. Focus reminder, I don't use that. My filters are parfocal. However, if I'm using the autofocus, which I do use mainly for narrowband imaging, although they are parfocal filters, occasionally I do use the autofocus function. So if you haven't got parfocal filters and you do not use autofocus, you need to remind yourself to do that, or you can use the autofocus function. I don't use any temperature compensate. Again, I have my autofocus settings set at every 2 degrees. So if I am using the autofocus function, it will undertake the auto function sequence. However, if you have managed to work out the compensation between filters and temperatures and stuff, you can set offsets on your filters between changing filters, and you can also set temperature compensate between temperature. This is your frame and focus default settings. I only use one by one, as I've said previously. I don't use any binning, and I have that set at 3 seconds as a default. However, when I do focus with the Bahtinov mask, I do actually use these exposures. Even with the Bahtinov masks, I tend to find, I do get a better result when I'm focusing by using the exposure lengths for each filter. So I still use those even with a manual focus, and you can just set that down in your frame and focus. Telescope, this is my EQ6R Pro. As you can see, I use EQ Mod. Again, if you hit the settings buttons, it brings up EQ Mod. I will do a separate tutorial on EQ Mod. I think it's brilliant. I sort of got away from using the handheld controller quite early doors. A lot of people still use it. A lot of experienced astrophotographers use it still. Trevor Jones from Astro Backyard, he still uses the handheld controller. Nothing wrong with it. However, I just tend to find it a lot better using my computer. So here I have park telescope when sequence completes. I always have this enabled, so when the sequencer is finished, it will park my telescope. If you do have this function enabled, there's no need to have the stop tracking when sequence completes, as when you park your telescope, it will automatically tell PhD2 to stop tracking. Allow external control telescopes. So basically, if you do use a handheld controller and you have apps, Sky Safari apps or stuff like that, that you use to control your mount from your mobile phone, you will need to have this selected, but I do not need that. Use auto meridian flip. So this is quite an important one. You should always use auto meridian flip. I never like to do it manually. I haven't really been successful doing it manually. So I always use the auto. So this is the auto flip options. So I always undertake a auto meridian flip 1 minute past the meridian. I have this here selected, wait for meridian. So basically what this is if you're halfway through an exposure and you don't have this selected and you hit the meridian and you're 1 minute past it, it will cancel that exposure and it will flip. So what this will do, if an exposure, so you're doing a 2 minute exposure and you're 1 minute away from the meridian, once it's finished that exposure, it will wait until the meridian flip has been successful before it starts a new exposure. Pause before the meridian flip. I keep this disabled, as this will need you to confirm. So if you don't want to use it as an auto function, you select this and it will bring up a display and say you need to confirm you want me to undertake a meridian flip. But if you're like me, once you're set up and you sort of like to get into bed and just keep an eye on things, I sort of let it do everything automatically. Auto censoring after meridian flip. So this is your plate solving. So after a meridian flip, you will never be exactly where you were before the flip. So what this does is this, after the meridian flip, this allows plate solve 2 to use the previous image before the flip to undertake a blind solve and get me back to where I was within 50 pixels. I think I'm set out, or maybe less. Auto meridian flip delay. Again, I just have this set at 30 seconds. I think 30 seconds is the default. I've not had any issues with that, so 30 seconds works for me. I'm just not sure if that is the default setting. Where are we? Sync behavior default. Leave this at sync unless you have target and scope offsets, but you should always leave that at sync. I've never really tried setting target offsets or scope offsets. I've always found that sync works best for me. Mount settling time. Now, I've had some problems with this in the past. Now, the default setting is 10 seconds, I believe. The problem is with that is I found sometimes that my mount would still be settling when the plate solving was starting. So when the plate solving was starting, I found like I had small star trails in my plate solve images to sort of plate solve the image, then to sync the mount. So if I didn't have elongated stars, I had small star trails, which suggested to me that it started the plate solving process during my mount settling time. So I've upped that to 20 seconds, and I've not had any problems with it since. Scope focal length, mine's 550 millimeters. So whatever your scope focal length is, if you do have any focal reducers, obviously you need to make sure that you put the correct calculated focal lengths in there. So obviously mine's a field flattener, and I do not need any focal reducers. Telescopes nudge, I've sort of left these at default, haven't played around with them. They haven't caused me any issues, so defaults, leave them as they are. So plate solving. So for you that don't know, so plate solving is basically the plate solving software will take an image of your current position and where the mount thinks it's pointing at your target, and then the plate solver will take a short exposure. It will work out exactly where your mount actually is, and then what it will do, it will undertake small slews of the mount to bring your target into the centre of the field of view. So that's what plate solving is, basically. I will do a separate tutorial around this, but it is, for me, it's a must-have. I've had so many problems in the past occasionally where, like things like setting up in the dark and your polar alignment's not correct, and, star alignment becomes difficult, and, you just can't get your image where you want it in the field of view. So plate solving just takes all of that stress away. So if you hit this is plate solve here. Again, I will do a separate tutorial around plate solving. There's a few things that you need to know and have set up to get that successful. Regions, I've left this as default, max regions. Sort of don't really know what it is, but I assume it's to do with the search algorithm it uses. Binning, I do use one by one. I don't bin at all, to be honest, so I just leave that at one by one. Exposure, I have at 15 seconds. The default is 10. Again, the longer the exposure, the more pixels stars that you will get. So I don't really go too much. I think 15 seconds, sort of works for me. Attempt to center. So I keep this at 10. 10 seems to work for me. I normally get centered around at attempt 3, potentially 4. I've never really gone over that, but again, if you're getting problems with plate solving, if it only does it 3 times and it's not centre, it will complete the plate solve or it will fail. So, there's no harm in having this, up in the 10s or 20s or, whatever you feel that you need it. At the end of the day, you don't want it to fail. I have mine set up, I believe, within 50 pixels yet. So again, if you have that size set at 5 and you get to 55 pixels within 5 attempts, your plate solve will fail. So 10 is a good number. 50 pixels, again, as default. I have tried going lower. You are at risk of getting failed attempts. If you do have problems, even with 10 and you still can't get to 50 pixels, if you just adjust this slightly and sort of increase that, you can sort of get up to that. I've left this at default. Don't actually know what it is, I'm not going to lie, so I've sort of left it at default and not had any issues. So the filter I use is Luminance. I don't know why that wasn't selected there, so let me just save that. I use Luminance for all my focus. So yeah, no problems there. Again, if you have part focal filters, you should only have to focus with one filter. Plate solving, I tend to use Luminance because Luminance normally has the most amount of detail. The last thing you want to be doing is trying to plate solve with like an O3 filter where you don't really have that many stars. So you want to have as much detail as possible as you can. Use blinds plate solving. I never used to use this. I've only really started using this now. Sometimes I found that plate solving with it just wouldn't work. So sometimes I'd have the blind solve selected. All depending on where I was. If I was at home, I would obviously be connected to the internet, so I would use this setting here. But I have the catalogs downloaded. If I'm remote, I use the remote. So I do have it selected. It very rarely uses blind solve because I don't really get that many failures. Auto guiding. So PhD2 is my auto guide software. Everyone sort of uses that. I haven't really actually seen any other softwares, to be honest. So I do diver. I do small divers. I diver every 5 frames. It all depends on your exposure lengths. Now, I tend to stick to 300 seconds, 5-minute exposure times, but with the 1600 ASI 1600, you can do 60-second exposures. But if you're divering every frame or every 1 frame at 60 seconds, believe me, your guiding will be. It will look terrible, and I've had people say to me, "Why is my guiding this bad?" And I'm like, if you're doing 60-second exposures and you're divering every frame, obviously, your guiding is never going to be perfect. So I have a small diver every 5 frames, and that's that. Obviously, I've just forgot to mention here, this is the PhD2 guiding settings here. So that's where it's stored. That's the profile that I'll use. I will do a live tutorial on PhD2 guiding and show you guys my guiding. I have had a lot of feedback online with regards to my guiding. I don't know how. I've done a lot of research into guiding, and my guiding seems to be really good at the moment. So it's one of my strong points. Certainly better than my processing. So down here, open and connect PhD guiding when sequence starts. So I sort of leave that off because I like to link everything manually. I like to make sure that everything is connected, everything is there. I don't like, sequence to automatically connect my equipment and stuff like that. Disconnect gear from PHD when sequence is done. So, as I said earlier, back in the telescope mount settings, when the sequence is complete and the telescope's parked, it will just disconnect the gear, stop looping, disconnect from the mount, and just shut everything down basically. So I'll just close that. Settling out, I always have that at 6 pixels. Now, again, you've got to be careful with this, because when you try and start a sequence, if your guiding is not settled at a certain amount of pixels, the sequence won't start. So I've played around with it and I've come up with the magic number of 0.6. So 0.6 seems to work for me. If you get an error message that comes up when you're trying to run your sequences stating that your guiding has not settled, that will be due to this value. So just increase it. I can't remember what the default is, but I've sort of adjusted mine to 0.6, and I found that at that value I never had that error message again. Stop auto guider when sequence is complete. Again, like I said previously in the telescopes, when it's complete, that will stop. Pause guiding during autofocus. Some people do pause it, some people don't. I found that I've had problems by not pausing it during autofocus, so I have that selected. These here, set auto guider before auto frame focus. Again, when I'm doing my auto frame focus, I'm not really guiding, to be honest. When I'm using a batten off mask, I don't really guide. I like to do everything before I sort of start guiding. So I sort of leave all of these ones unchecked. Pause guiding during image download. Why would you want to do that? Pause guiding during backlash. I don't use backlash for obviously off-axis guiders. Restart current frame when guided distances. Again, I don't use that at all. To be honest, I don't really know what it does, but all I know is it aborts and restarts current frames, and the last thing you want is frames to be aborted. So I'm assuming is if that reaches a certain amount of distance, it will abort the image. But I'd rather go through my images after and select which ones I'm going to sort of discard. Recalibrate auto guider when target changes. Now, I will cover this more in my PhD 2 tutorial, but I recalibrate every single night of imaging session. I have done multiple targets in one night, so again, I always believe that you should recalibrate your auto guider when you change your target and during every night of imaging. Some people don't. I've known people not to recalibrate their guiding for months, and obviously they always ask me why they got problems. This is just other settings if you have a flat box. I don't have a flat box. I do have a well, this is actually an automatic flat box. I don't know if you've actually seen them, but they actually strap onto the front of your telescope. I do have a field flattener box, but just not one that's permanently attached to my telescope. Rotator, again, if you have one of those, you can connect that. An observatory, safe monitoring devices, environmental devices. I don't have environmental devices like sky quality devices or anything like that. I just tend to use all of the sensors that come with my equipment. So there you have it. That's my profile manager. That's all my settings there. I'll just save that. There's a few other things that I just wanted to sort of go through before I sort of came onto the sequencer, and that is the recovery mode. So if you just double click recovery down here, now this is really important that you do get this, because I've literally gone to sleep and woken up halfway through the night and realised that my sequence was aborted after 1 hour of imaging, and I was set up for 6-7 images so 6-7 hours of imaging that night. So as you can imagine, that would be very, very frustrating. And I couldn't quite understand why it was doing that. And I actually found it was to do with the plate solving. So I had a problem with my plate solving. It tried to plate solve once, it failed. And instead of running the plate solving sequence again, it aborted the whole sequence. So obviously, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you have basically this here. So this is sequence recovery. Attempt to automatically recover the sequence. So mine is attempt 5 recoveries every minute for 90 minutes. So 1.5 hours. So basically, every 5 minutes for 90 minutes, it will try to recover the sequence. So yeah, pretty much, because if you get the smallest little issue, the last thing you want is, I don't know, you lose a guide star. I've had that before in the past. So I lost a guide star, had a bit of cloud that came over, and after the guide star was, gone after 5 attempts to restart guiding, that was it. It aborted my sequence, and I lost 5 hours of imaging that night. Very frustrating. I was doing the dumbbell nebula at the time. So yeah, very important. So also this brings up the general setting option. So this is all the general stuff really. Auto stretch level I've got set as high. This here is your defaults for how your files are saved. So these are what the different names that you can have in your file directories. And I'll actually show you what they look like when I go through this. So here is your profile directories where everything's saved, your image directories. I have a folder where all my raw images go into, and then I have a folder where all my profile and equipment managers are set up. Okay, so if I just close that, so that's it. So now once you're all set up and you've got everything where you want it, this is your main sequence screen here. So this is my file names. These are how my file names are set up. You can manually connect all your equipment here, so everything's now connected. So that's there, right? So what I normally do, the first thing I do when I'm setting up a new target, actually what I'll do is I actually load one up that I've done. So if I open a sequence, let's just do Andromeda Galaxy one night. Should we do that? Let me just open that up. I wonder what's happened there. I'll just close that. Open sequence. Let's do the elephant trunk. There you go. So this is one of my sequence. So this sort of gives you an idea. So what you do, you put your name in, put the coordinates in that I get from Sterilium, or you can upload a photo from AstroBin and everything like that. So basically, once you've got all your information in here, and you've unparked your telescope, if you hit the slew now, what that will do is that will slew to the target. Then it will automatically run the plate solving software. So it will center the target to the center of the field of view. And then once that's done, it will, commence with your sequence. So here, slew when target starts and center on target. So normally I'd have both of those selected. So the moment I hit the run button, it will slew to the target, center the target, and then begin the sequence. So here is your profile manager. So just make sure that your profile manager is selected. Obviously, because that's going to have all your coordinates, your latitude, longitude, and altitude. You'll know if something's not selected because it won't have this. It will just say no profile. So this here states your equipment profile and your user profile here. this is all your equipment, like I said, so make sure everything's connected. And then here is your sequence profile. So you have lights, darks, flats, and bias frames. You then select your filters. You then set your exposure lengths. Or just do it. So you've got 300-second exposure. What you're doing at binning and how many sequence repeats that you have. So I've got 34 exposures at 300 seconds of hydrogen alpha, and that is it really. So that's sequence generator pro wrapped up very briefly. I will do a tutorial on the flats wizard, and I'll also do a tutorial on plate solving. Thank you very much.